Imagine it's August 11th, 1999. You're alone on a starship called the Von Braun, somewhere in the cold dark between the stars. And something has gone very wrong. The crew is dead. The corridors tick and breathe around you. And then a voice slides into your ear, calm, feminine, almost amused. And it tells you that you are nothing. An insect. A mistake she fully intends to correct. Her name is SHODAN. And System Shock 2 has just shown a whole generation of game makers what genuine fear feels like with a controller in your hands. And here's the strange part. That exact date on the calendar, August 11th, is also a birthday. 3 years before SHODAN, a designer in Japan had already bottled the same dread and sold it to the entire world, coining a phrase for it: survival horror. His name is Shinji Mikami, and he was born on this day. 2 pillars of video game fear sharing one square on the calendar. This week is about fear, about creation, about the games that clawed their way back from the dead. We're talking about all this and more on This Week in Video Game History. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Doug Coleman, and this week we are covering August 10th through the 16th. A week about fear, about creation, and about the games that got a second life when everyone had written them off. This week gave us 2 of Nintendo's friendliest mascots, a plumber with a 9-iron, and a giant yellow bird behind the wheel. A rhythm game so obscure it never left Japan, stranded on a handheld almost nobody owned. A starship, a voice in the dark, and the blueprint for modern horror. A beat-em-up that vanished from every store on Earth for 7 straight years. A drug-soaked English town where being unhappy is a crime. 4 masked robbers whose heist ran for a decade. And a sequel that pitted your lawn full of plants against the undead all over again, this time for free. 7 games across 3 decades, 1 designer's birthday that changed what scares us all, and 3 stories worth slowing down for. So grab your controller and press start to continue. Here's everything that dropped the week of August 10th through the 16th across gaming history. 7 games, 3 decades, and a whole lot of dread lurking just under the surface. Let's run it. We start on August 10th, 1999, with 2 of gaming's most recognizable mascots doing something delightfully off-brand. In Japan, Nintendo and Camelot put out Mario Golf on the Game Boy Color. And here's the wild part: it's secretly a role-playing game. You make your own golfer, you earn experience points, you level up your stats, and you battle your way through a golf academy. It talked to the Nintendo 64 version as well, letting you carry your character between the 2. That same day in North America, Square, yes, the Final Fantasy people, released Chocobo Racing on the original PlayStation. A bright, kart-style racer built around those big yellow birds. Quick honesty flag for this one. Sources split on Chocobo Racing's exact North American date between the 10th and the 12th, but either way it lands squarely in our window. 2 giant franchises, one loosening their tie and picking up a 9-iron, the other one strapping a saddle on a chocobo. Proof that even in 1999, the biggest names in gaming just wanted to goof off sometimes. Same date 1 year later, August 10th, 2000. And here's this week's deep cut. Cool Jam from SNK on the Neo Geo Pocket in Japan, and only in Japan. It's a rhythm game, all bright color and bounce, and by every account, a genuinely charming one. But it had the worst luck imaginable. It was born on a dying machine. The Neo Geo Pocket was SNK's swing at Nintendo's handheld throne, And against the Game Boy Color, it never stood a chance. The platform was effectively abandoned in the West almost as fast as it had arrived. Here's the detail that stings. SNK actually produced a fully translated English sample of Cool Cool Jam for reviewers, meaning a Western release was right there on the table. It never happened. The game stayed locked behind a language barrier and a failed console. A little pocket of joy almost nobody outside Japan ever got to hear. If you like your history with a forgotten gem in it, this is one to remember. August 10th, 2010. One more from that busy calendar day, and this is a game with a genuinely strange life story. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, arrived on the PlayStation Network as a tie-in to the movie, a gorgeous throwback beat-em-up with pixel art dripping in retro love and a chiptune soundtrack by Anna Managuchi that people still play on its own. It was a joy. And then it disappeared. Every copy gone because when the license expired, it got pulled from the digital stores. And since it never had a disc release, there was suddenly no legal way on earth to buy it. For almost 7 years, it was a ghost. There's a whole story in how it vanished and what finally brought it back, and we're going to get to that one later in this episode, so hold on to that thought. Last stop on August 10th, jumping ahead to 2018. We Happy Few from Compulsion Games finally hit its full release after a couple of years in early access. Picture an alternate 1960s England, a quaint little town called Wellington Wells, where something genuinely awful happened during the war. And everyone has chosen to forget about it by taking a drug called joy that keeps them permanently, chemically, blissfully happy. To stop taking it, to let yourself actually feel something, is a crime. You're a downer. And the whole smiling town wants you dealt with. It's a brilliant, unsettling premise, and the game had a rocky road. It started life as a roguelike survival game and pivoted hard into a narrative partway through, which left it a little uneven when it landed. But that world stuck with people. August 11th, 1999, and now we get into the one that matters the most this week. System Shock 2 from Looking Glass Studios and a young team called Irrational Games, published by Electronic Arts. You wake up in a starship, the crew is dead, and a voice starts talking to you, cold, brilliant, utterly contemptuous. Her name is SHODAN, and she remains one of the greatest villains this medium has ever produced. But here's why designers still talk about this game in hushed tones. It fused things nobody had really fused before. A shooter, a role-playing game, a survival horror story, and a world that let you solve it your own way. That recipe has a name now. We call it the Immersive Sim, and if you've ever played BioShock, you've played System Shock's 2 grandchild. It flopped, by the way, sold poorly, nearly vanished, and it became one of the most influential games ever made anyway. One more thing about this date, August 11th, is also a birthday. One that matters enormously to the history of fear games. We'll come back to that. For now, though, don't trust the monkeys. August 13th, 2013. Time to pull on a clown mask. Payday 2 from Overkill Software dropped 4 career criminals, Dallas, Hoxton, Chains, and Wolf, into the best co-op heist game anybody had made. You and 3 friends cased a bank, argued about whether to go in quiet or loud, and then watched the plan fall apart in the most gloriously chaotic way possible. It's loud, it's tense, it's hilarious, and it's the single most just play fun game on this week's list. But the real story of Payday 2 is that it never ended. Overkill supported this thing for years. Hundreds of updates, new heists, new gear, a game that was still getting content a decade after launch. It also became a lightning rod because some of those updates added paid microtransactions to a full-price game, and the community revolted. Love it or argue with it, Payday 2 is a landmark of the games as a service era. The moment a game stopped being a thing you bought and became a place you kept coming back to. And we finish on August 15th, 2013 with a lawn, a horde of zombies, and a whole lot of controversy. Plants vs. Zombies 2 came out on the iPhones and iPads worldwide, the sequel to one of the most beloved little strategy games ever made. The original was pure, perfect design. You bought it once, you planted your pea shooters, you laughed at the dancing zombies, and everybody went home happy. The sequel kept that brilliant tower defense core and added time travel. New worlds, new plants. But it arrived free to play, built around in-app purchases. And for a lot of longtime fans, that was a gut punch. The pure thing they loved now nudging them to spend. It's a fascinating, slightly bittersweet entry. A genuinely good game caught right on the fault line as the whole industry tilted towards mobile and free to play. The zombies were back, but the rules of the game around the game had completely changed. So let's go back to that August 11th birthday I keep teasing. On this day in 1965, a man by the name of Shinji Mikami was born. And if you've ever been genuinely scared holding a controller, you owe him a debt. We spent time in his most famous house before on this show, so I won't walk you back through that mansion. What I want to talk about instead is everything else after it. Because here's the thing about Mikami. He refused to sit still. He gave the world survival horror, and then almost a decade later, he blew up his own creation. With Resident Evil 4, he yanked the camera up over the hero's shoulder, made it fast and tense and kinetic, and in the process reinvented not just horror games, but the entire third-person action genre. Half the blockbusters you've played since take their camera from that one game. And he kept going. He shepherded the birth of Devil May Cry. He made the gloriously weird God Hand, the slick sci-fi shooter Vanquish, and then when the industry had drifted away from real horror, he came back and planted a flag with The Evil Within, as if to remind everyone whose genre this was in the first place. That's the theme of this whole day, really. System Shock 2 comes out on August 11th, 1999, and teaches a generation of designers how dread works on a starship. And August 11th is the birthday of the man who taught it to work in a mansion, and then a village, and then anywhere he pointed his camera at. Fear, it turns out, has a couple of birthdays this week. There is a whole episode's worth of story in Mikami's career and the genre he built, and we're going to give it the room it deserves down the road. Keep the lights on for that one. Now back to that ghost I mentioned in the timeline. When Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, came out on August 10th, 2010, it was a licensed tie-in. Ubisoft's game built around the movie, which was built around the comics. And licenses, it turns out, have an expiration date. On December 30th, 2014, that license ran out and the game was quietly pulled from the PlayStation and Xbox stores. Now, here's where it gets serious. It never had a disc release. So the day it left those digital storefronts was the day it stopped existing on something a human being could legally buy. Not hard to find, not expensive. Gone. If you didn't already own it, you were simply out of luck for years. And that turned this cheerful little beat 'em up into the center of one of the most important arguments in modern gaming. When everything is digital, do you actually own any of it? Or are you just renting access until a contract somewhere expires and a game you love silently evaporates? Scott Pilgrim became the poster child for that fear. The proof that games can rot, that our history has a delete key, and that preservation isn't some dusty side concern. It's the whole ballgame. This story does have a happy ending. After years of fan campaigning, it came back. In January of 2021, complete edition and, crucially, with a physical disc this time, so it could never fully vanish again. But the bigger question it raised hasn't gone anywhere. The whole strange world of games we've lost and games we've saved is a story we're going to sit down and tell properly another time. It's one of the most important ones we've got right now. Let's end somewhere hopeful. For a long time, and Sonic fans, you know exactly what I'm talking about, the people who understood Sonic the Hedgehog the best were not the people making the Sonic games. They were out in the community, the modders, the fan game makers, the folks reverse engineering the old Genesis physics in their spare time because they loved it that much. One of them was a developer named Christian Whitehead, and he built something remarkable. An engine that recreated the exact feel of classic Sonic, frame for frame, better than most official attempts had managed in years. Sega noticed. They hired him to build the official mobile remasters of the old games, and those were fantastic. And then Whitehead walked into Sega with a prototype for something new, and Sega did something they had never done before. They handed the keys to the fans. Sonic Mania came out on August 15th, 2017, built largely by Whitehead and two small independent studios, Headcanon and Pagoda West, people who'd come up loving this character. And it was the best Sonic game in a quarter of a century. Not a nostalgia cash-in, a real, joyful, lovingly crafted return to form that critics and lifelong fans adored in a way they hadn't in a very long time. That's the whole beautiful idea here. Sometimes the people who will save the thing you love aren't the professionals inside the building. They're the obsessives out in the community who never stopped caring, just waiting for someone to finally trust them with it. There's a much bigger story in Sonic's long fall and that fan community that kept the flame alive, and we'll come back and tell it in full one day. For now, just know it was a happy ending, and it landed this week. Think back to where we started. A dark starship, a dead crew, and a voice in your ear telling you you were nothing. That's where this week lives, right on the edge of fear. On August 11th, System Shock 2 taught a generation of designers how Dread really works, and it shares that date with the birthday of Shinji Mikami, the man who'd already taught the whole world the same lesson. Some weeks just belong to the things that scare us. But look at everything else this one gave us. Two of Nintendo's mascots clowning around with golf clubs and go-karts. A little rhythm game so full of life stranded forever on a console nobody bought. A dystopia where they will arrest you for refusing to smile. A heist that ran for a decade. And two stories about disappearing and coming back. A game that vanished from the face of the earth for 7 years before fans dragged it back into the light. And a hedgehog that finally got saved by the very people who loved him the most. Fear and loss. Second chances. That's the whole week, really. Because here's what this hobby keeps proving to us. Nothing in it is ever really finished. A flop becomes a foundation. A deleted game claws its way back onto a shelf. A dying series gets handed to the fans and comes home. Just when you think a game's story is over, it takes a breath and it keeps going. 50 years in, this medium refuses to stay buried. And that's why we keep showing up. Okay, that is it for today's episode, everybody. Thank you all very much for watching. If you like the show, drop us a follow or a comment on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Music. Artwork for the show is done by Ms. Tink. Music done by Shane Mandini. The show is written and produced by me, Doug Coleman. Be sure to save your game, nerds. I'll see you next week.